My cousin and I are half Navajo. He grew up out west while I grew up on the East Coast. Every summer we went out there and stayed with them for a couple of weeks. This story is about a Skinwalker encounter he told me about the last time we were there. Just so you know, Andrew, my cousin, he isn't a nervous guy. Hell, scary stories never bothered him. He's 6'7". He's 220 pounds of pure muscle. There's not much for a guy his size to be scared of. But when he told us this story, you could tell there was fear in his eyes. He worked at a 24-hour convenience store, and it sat in an area where there wasn't much business, even during the day. But he usually worked the night shift, 11 at night until about 6 or 7 in the morning. There were a few customers, mostly third-shift workers from the furniture factory a couple miles down the road. A few of them would come in and get a deli sandwich on their lunch break. Before I go any further, a little backstory. Andrew was always up for anything that was considered dangerous or risky, if there was a supernatural element involved. My dad blames his sister for that. They were born on a reservation, but my dad decided that it wasn't the life he wanted, and he left the res when he was only 18. There was a big argument with his parents over the decision, but once my dad makes up his mind about something, there's no changing it. His sister, however, remained on the reservation until she was 19, and that's when she met Andrew's father in town. He was white, so my grandparents weren't too thrilled with her life choices. Different times, different people. So her parents gave her so much grief that she moved off the reservation into the outskirts of town with her new husband. And a year later, Andrew was born. And he's 6 months older than me, so we've always been able to relate to each other pretty well. My father made sure that we were out there every summer for the usual 2-week stay, and more often if he had the money for it. Now, Andrew's mom remained close to her heritage, and so far as their beliefs, she had many friends on the reservation. One day, Andrew overheard her talking to his father. She had heard that there was a Skinwalker living in a nearby cave. She believed it could have been a woman she knew well. A lot of people on the reservation knew her, but few people interacted with her. She was a medicine woman who turned to the darker side of magic. There were rumors about her niece who went missing and was never found. And they said she used her niece as a sacrifice to some sort of dark force. Afterwards, the medicine woman disappeared too. The search went on for months, but neither of the women were found. Then, someone saw her at an old house. It was late at night, and a group of boys out drinking thought the abandoned little shack would make a good place to hole up for the night and sleep off their booze. Well, they were wrong. Once inside her house, they staggered through the living room and into her kitchen, looking for anything that would prove that she had sacrificed her niece. The alcohol surely clouded their minds because as they made their way into her bedroom, 2 of the boys swore they saw her jump out of the open window to remain hidden from them. She wasn't a young woman by any stretch of the imagination. Jumping out of any window would have been impossible. So the others went to investigate. And they swore on their lives that there was a large coyote sitting a few yards from the window. On its back was the shawl of the old medicine woman. When they moved outside to get a closer look, the coyote took off and soon was running on 2 feet away from them. Now this story piqued Andrew's interest, and he told some of his friends about it. Not being Navajo, they laughed and thought it was just a story. There was nothing real about it. Just some teenagers boozed up and making up some tall tales. Their dismissal of it angered Andrew. He and his friends had a falling out that day. He spent his shift at the store that night devising a plan to prove them wrong. When the third shift workers came in for their lunch break, he talked with them as he always did. Then Vincent came to the counter. Vincent was full-blooded Navajo, and he knew his way around the canyons and desolate countryside better than anybody else. Andrew dispensed with the small talk and asked Vincent if he heard the rumors about the Skinwalkers supposedly living in a cave somewhere on reservation land. Vincent eyed him silently. He paid for his sandwich, and he walked away without another word. Now that only made Andrew more determined. He said he knew it meant Vincent had heard about it and probably knew the location of the supposed cave. Vincent's father had been a guide for 52 years on the reservation, and Vincent had taken up the mantle of guide when his father was no longer able to do it. As the men left to return to their jobs, Vincent walked back to the counter and told Andrew flatly that he should leave some things alone. Andrew told him he would pay him any amount of money if he would take him to the cave. Well, shaking his head, Vincent just left. Now the next morning, Andrew got off of work and went to meet Vincent at his house. Vincent told him he shouldn't be there, and he should leave before he got into something he couldn't get out of. And he shut the door in Andrew's face. Now over the next week, Andrew was relentless. He wouldn't leave Vincent alone about it. He stood outside his house one day, and Vincent again shut the door in his face and told him everything he had ever heard about Skinwalkers. And when he got to the part about the medicine woman supposedly sacrificing her niece to become a Skinwalker, Vincent stepped outside. He grabbed Andrew and turned him around to face the back of his property, as he pointed to the fence and told Andrew to be quiet. My cousin said he saw a coyote standing on 2 feet, peering around a tree at them. Vincent clamped a hand over Andrew's mouth and shook his head, telling him to back slowly into the house. Andrew looked out a window, but the creature was gone. He said Vincent was angry with him. In Vincent's mind, the Skinwalker had marked him because Andrew wouldn't shut up about it and kept coming to his house for help. Seeing this as an opportunity, Andrew used it for leverage. Well, now that you're marked by it too, there's nothing to lose. Show me where the cave is. I want to see if it's really this old medicine woman, or if it's just some deformed coyote. Who knows, maybe I'll even find her niece. Andrew said he thought Vincent would physically throw him out, but he didn't. Fine. You want to go messing with this? That's your hide, not mine. If you get killed, it's your own ignorance that caused it. Andrew, be here tomorrow evening. I don't work. Meet me here at 5 and I'll show you the cave. Thanks, Vincent. I'll pay you whatever you want, Andrew told him excitedly. Never come back here. That's payment enough. I don't need you bringing your trouble here anymore. Vincent climbed in his truck and left. The next evening, Andrew met Vincent and they left in his truck. Still angry with my cousin, Vincent made the ride as rough as possible. It took 25 minutes to reach the location. Vincent stopped the truck but told Andrew not to get out, or he would leave him there. He pointed out the opening of the cave. It was an old cave, and once inside, he said it turned into a labyrinth of tunnels that extended far under the mountain and descended deeper than he cared to go. It would be easy to get lost, become disoriented, and even if there were no Skinwalker there, Andrew could run into a number of other dangers. some of them obviously fatal. Turning back towards his house, Vincent seemed more on edge than usual and kept looking into his side mirrors and to the sides of the dirt road. All Andrew saw was the red dust flying up in plumes from his tires. At his house, Vincent parked the truck and told Andrew to leave immediately and not come back. He did. And that night, Andrew met up with the same friends who laughed at his story about the Skinwalker. He bragged to them that he knew exactly where the cave was, and that he planned on going out there and exploring it to see if he could see the Skinwalker up close. Hell, maybe even kill it. As they were standing propped against the side of their cars talking, Andrew caught movement at the edge of the parking lot, where there were scrub bushes and a few small trees. The sun had set, and the only light was from the one tall street lamp at the edge of the lot. It was a sickly yellow color that did little to really illuminate anything. He opened his car door and popped on the headlights. A large coyote sat only a few yards from the group, its eyes glowing a deep red color in the bright lights. He pointed it out, and the others started whooping and trying to scare it off, but it remained, seemingly unbothered by their noise. It stared straight at Andrew, unnerving him. It ran away when some of the guys started throwing rocks at it. Andrew said he was sure it was the same coyote he had seen at Vincent's. He didn't know how he knew it, but he did. His friends laughed and made jokes about it being the Skinwalker come to get him. And yeah, they had a real good laugh at his expense. Then they decided to go into town to the local pool hall where they would gamble on a few games, win a few beers, and have a good time. Andrew joined them just to keep from being alone, and the coyote had made him nervous. It wasn't normal for a coyote to get that close to people, especially a group making noise. He didn't drink or play much pool that night. He said he just sat and thought about that coyote in the Skinwalker's cave. He was on the verge of backing out, letting the subject go, when one of his friends wanted to know when they were going to the cave. Andrew said he tried to back out of it, saying that he had to work every night for the next 6 days and wouldn't have the time to go. But the group decided it would be the perfect time to go, right then. It was already late and there was nothing left to do in town, and none of them had work the next day. There was no excuse not to go, unless Andrew was afraid, of course. Letting his pride get the better of him, he denied being afraid, and his buddies told him to prove it. Besides, how much danger could they face from one old woman living in a cave? If even that much of the story happened to be true. And what chance did any creature stand against a group of 6 strong young men? Once they got going on the subject, there was nothing to do but go along with his original plan. And so they gathered flashlights, a few ropes, and Andrew grabbed the large ball of farm twine. But none of them had a gun. Andrew had his hunting knife, a big knife that lived in a traditional leather sheath that he tied to his thigh. His grandfather had given him the knife, and his mother had tooled the leather sheath. The other guys only had a machete, a bat, and 2 pocket knives between them. As they neared the cave, Andrew was enveloped in a feeling of dread so heavy that it nearly made him sick. Rather than lose face with his friends, he pushed onward, leading the little party into the mouth of the cave. There was no way to describe how completely and utterly black it was inside that cave, or so he said. The flashlights, rather than illuminating the large room, pierced the darkness in straight beams. It was as if the blackness around them absorbed the light. He said the faint smell of dead animals wafted out of the tunnel in front of them. And tying the end of the twine to a rock, Andrew nodded that he was ready to go in farther. The twine would keep them from getting lost, as they could easily follow it back out. And he told me that at one point, they had to get on their knees and crawl through a long section of tunnel, and he found it hard to breathe. He didn't say anything to anyone else, because nobody else mentioned feeling that way. They chose another tunnel and headed into it, and an echoing howl halted their progress. It was impossible to determine which direction it came from, and they urged him on, pushing him along in front of them. The tunnel led out into a large oval chamber. The top soared far above them. Their flashlight beams wouldn't illuminate the far wall, and shadows seemed to move, writhe, and dart just outside the dim lights. Now at this time, Andrew, having seen enough, turned to the group and shouted that they needed to leave immediately. And as he was herding them back toward the tunnel, a menacing growl came from right behind him. Spinning with his flashlight held out, he said he saw the coyote with red eyes standing on two legs. It was as tall as he was. It was shedding human skin right before his eyes, ripping long, wide swatches of the slimy flesh off its legs and tossing it to the cave floor. The others trained their lights on the abomination, and then Andrew was alone as his friends ran. He was frozen to the spot, staring at the horror before him. The stench of death was thick, and he gagged as the thing took a step toward him, more flesh splatting to the stones. The face, still transforming into that of a coyote, terrified him as he saw the last bit of humanity disappeared. He started moving backwards, unable to turn his back on the monster. And it didn't follow him into the tunnel, and soon his light was too far away to illuminate the beast. He turned and ran, hearing his friends far ahead. When he got to the spot where he had to crawl, he dropped the ball of twine he'd been holding and scooted through as fast as he could without looking back. And just as he stood, he heard the claws of the monster scraping along the rocks. He screamed for the boys to run faster. They cleared the cave and made it almost to their car when the coyote emerged from the cave on two legs. Andrew drove, and at times, his speedometer shivered just above 60. That beast paced alongside them, never letting them get far from it. All the guys were screaming and trying to pull out their cell phones to record the thing. And then, all of a sudden, it was gone. Leaving the reservation, they all calmed down a little. None of their phones had succeeded in capturing a good image of the Skinwalker. It's like Bigfoot photos, where they're all so blurry the subject, well, could be anything. They all went to Andrew's house for the night, crashing in the basement, laughing and retelling parts of the adventure that scared the hell out of them the most. And even though they didn't go to sleep soon, they did eventually fall asleep sometime around sunrise. Andrew woke from a dream in which the Skinwalker was creeping into his bed, saliva dripping from its huge white teeth. He could feel the weight of it. He could smell its putrid breath. And he sat straight up, gasping for air. His friends woke up soon after. He went outside with them as they got ready to leave, and there was a lot of shoulder punching and back patting going around. They had a good story to tell. They had themselves a grand adventure, seen a deformed and obviously rabid coyote, and they lived to tell the tale. Only Andrew believed it had been a Skinwalker they'd seen in that cave that had chased them off the reservation. And as he opened his driver door, go to work. His heart skipped a few beats. The stench of a dead animal took his breath, and lying all over the front seat was the twine he had stretched through the cave. And in the midst of the twine was a slimy piece of flesh.